everyone. Today I am sharing with you 5 old-fashioned, maybe a little crazy, frugal tips from my mom and one bonus hot tip at the end. My mom is the master of multipurpose, and maybe you know someone like that too. When she had something in our house, it was used for many different purposes. So now I am passing that down to you. Today we have 5 tips and one hot bonus. The first tip has to do with a clothesline. Now, I think we all know that clotheslines are great for airing out your laundry. They reduce the costs that are associated with dryers. But my mom had many different uses for her clothesline. It was not just used for clothes. As a kid, it became a fort. She would take some of the old sheets that she had in her house and she would lay them over the clotheslines so that we could play in there for hours. Now, she was pretty smart because that got us outside and she could watch us through her kitchen window. Now, it would give my mom some peace and quiet while she made dinner. And it also let us get out some of our wigglies. Now, when the clothesline wasn't being used for clothes or for a fort, she would also hang up her Ziploc bags. After she used them for many different purposes, but she reused them. And she would clean them out and she would hang them up on the clothesline with a clothespin. Now, we were always camping as kids, and whenever we got home from camping, the sleeping bags would lay over the clothesline to air out. My mom would also take the rugs from inside the house and hang them up on the clothesline, either with clothespins or she would use the clips from the shower curtain rod and just scoop them right through and hang them up on the clothesline. And that's how she would beat the rugs to get all the dirt and grit out of them. She would just bang on them with her broom to freshen them up and get them nice and clean. And whenever we washed the car, that's where the car mats went. She would just hang the clothes mats up onto the clothesline and just spray them down with the hose, give them a thorough washing, and then they would go back into the car. Now that's tip number 1. So please subscribe if you're enjoying my content and you would like to hear more. Now we're off to tip number 2. My mom would repurpose old towels and she would tear them into strips and make them into rags. And she would take bigger strips and use them for cleaning cloths like dusting. She transformed those old towels and repurposed them for cleaning around the house. She would use them on windows. She would use them to wipe down the counters. But that's not what this video is all about. This is about the unusual, old-fashioned, crazy kind of ways my mom would reuse things around the house. She was the queen of multi-purpose. Now, these little strips that she would tear up from the old towels, she would use to help tie up the plants in our garden. Now, that eventually became one of our jobs as kids, is to go out and tie up the tomatoes to the stakes using the old rags. She used these old rags to wash the boat, she used them to wash the camper, and she used them to wash the car. Now, one of the unique ways my mom would use the strips of the old towels was in a way that everyone might use a bungee cord these days. So in order to keep the lid onto the trash can, she would tie up the 2 handles on the end using one of those strips from the old towels so that the lid didn't blow away And she always had the right lid for the right can. She would just tie it up on one end. Now we're already going on to tip number 3, and I just want to remind you to stay for that last hot tip. Many people from the post Depression era, such as my mom, she was born in the 1930s, knew how to sew and mend, and that was not uncommon. They would patch holes, sew socks, darn socks is what they used to call it. She would sew her own clothes. She had a sewing machine. She knew how to use it. But my mom was far more creative than that. She was a master at finding alternatives to sewing. For any stuck zipper, she would use candle wax, and she would just run the candle from the bottom of the candle up and down the zipper and at the beginning, and that would unstick the zipper, and it made it easier for us as kids to zip up our own coats. She used safety pins for putting the strings back into the hoodies, because sometimes our hoodies, we had these strings and they would come loose in the washer or the dryer, and she would take a safety pin and just she would guide the string through that hole with the safety pin. Now, it's not really sewing or mending, but it's a way that my mom kept our feet dry in the wintertime with our boots. Somehow our socks always got wet, so she would use the Wonder Bag breads to line our boots, to pull over our feet, to stick into our boots so that our feet stayed dry. We had a lot of Wonder Bread bags. All right, we're off to tip number 4. My mom, I don't think she really liked doing house cleaning, but whenever it came to do house cleaning, she made that a part of her everyday work. So she didn't have to take 3 hours out of a Sunday to clean the house. She was constantly doing something to maintain the house. Now, for dusting, she had a couple of unique ways of getting the dusting done. And aside from the rag bag that we had that she did the dusting with, she had 2 other pieces of dusting equipment. One of them was quirky and unique, which she used on her feet. She had dusting slippers, and I'm gonna show you a short clip of some dusting slippers that I bought off of Amazon, just to give you some idea what my mother was doing when we were kids around the house. And you'll have some idea of what they look like. And they come in fantastic colors now, and it's just a fun way to get someone to do some housework. And she would put them on our feet and have us scuttling around, getting some of the dusting done around the floors. Now, the second piece of dusting equipment my mom had was on a wire clothes hanger. So she reformed a wire clothes hanger, and I'll try to find an example of it somewhere on the internet so you can see what it looks like. We no longer have it, and I have not found anything like it. It was reformed and lengthened so that she could clean on top of the refrigerator, she could clean on the sides of the refrigerator, she could clean on the underneath of the refrigerator, and use it the same way for the stove and hard to reach places. Now, that wire clothes hanger had loops of yarn hanging off of it, and she put those loops of yarn on that clothes hanger, and it was full. Like it was colorful, it was thick, and yet it got the job done because it was thin enough to fit in tight places. Okay, we're off to tip number 5. Now, my dad was a career railroad man, And he started off doing yard work on the rails, and eventually he ended up to be a locomotive engineer. For years, my mom had to clean the diesel and grease out of my dad's clothes so that he could get up and go back to work. She used less oil, and she used a bottle that had a rubber band around it with a toothbrush that was right by the washing machine, so that when my dad came home, the clothes were sent right into the laundry room, and she would scrub those grease stains with less oil. Now, less oil can be used for many different things. We used it to get the tar off of the cars. We used it on scuff marks, grass stains. I think she even used it to clean the toilet bowl. Now, I can still remember the smell of less oil, and if you've ever seen less oil or smelt less oil, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It takes me back to being a kid again whenever I smell the smell of less oil. Well, you made it. Those are my 5 tips, and now I've got the one hot tip for you. Now, I love that my mom had one product that did many different things. And now that I'm living a more frugal life, I feel like I'm being drawn back to my past and thinking about what my mom did post-depression era. My mom used Vicks Vapo Rub. Now, she used that when we were sick. She would take a tube sock with a safety pin and slather on some Vicks Vapo Rub and tie it around our necks to help us feel better. Now, if you had a sore neck, she would use the same thing. And anytime some little sniffles came out came the Vicks Vapo Rub, the tube sock, and the safety pin. Anytime a cough started, out comes the Vicks Vapo Rub, the tube sock, and a safety pin. If you had a headache, guess what happened? The Vicks Vapo Rub came out with a tube sock and the safety pin. She would rub a little on our temples just for that little bit extra, or a little bit below our nose just for that little bit extra. But if my mom knew that a cough or a cold or something was coming about, that Vicks Vapo Rub made it right to the counter so that we could all use it. Now, I hope these 5 old-fashioned, somewhat crazy, frugal tips from my mom help you in some small way. And thanks for watching. Bye for now.